The big room was full of scared voices and flashing lights. 17 different alien races sat around a huge table that looked like it was made from some kind of crystal that glowed from inside. Each alien looked different from the others, but they all had the same look of fear in their eyes or whatever they used to see with. Ambassador Zethkar stood up from his chair, and his forearms shook as he tried to hold the speaking device. He was from a race called the Vrelians, and he looked like a giant spider made of blue metal. When he spoke, his clicking sounds came out as words that everyone could understand through their translation machines. "The Devourers have eaten 3 more star systems," he said, and his voice sounded like he was about to cry. "Kepler 442, Ross 128, and Wolf 359 are now empty space with nothing left. Trillions of people are dead and gone forever." High above the main floor in a viewing area made of clear metal, Admiral Jake Harrison watched everything happen below. He was from Earth and wore the blue uniform of something called the Terran Federation. Earth had only been part of this galactic group for 6 months now. A Vrelian scout ship had found them when it picked up their old radio signals that leaked into space. The aliens thought humans were strange because they lived on what the galaxy called a deathworld. Most smart races came from planets with nice weather, plenty of food, and no dangerous animals. Earth was rated as a Class 12 deathworld, which meant it was one of the worst places to live that still had life on it. Dr. Lisa Murphy sat next to Jake and leaned forward to get a better look at the hologram showing the latest attack. She was Earth's expert on alien life and had been studying these creatures since they first heard about them. The things called Devourers looked like living ships made of crystal that could eat entire planets and turn everything into more of themselves. Nothing the galaxy had tried could even slow them down. "Every race is sending their best ships and fighters to make a last stand at the Arcturus system," Jake whispered to Colonel Ryan Davis, who sat on his other side. Ryan was a tough soldier who had fought in many wars on Earth before they found out about aliens. Ryan made a sound like he thought it was funny, but not in a good way. "Our best weapons are rockets that use chemicals to fly and bombs that split atoms. These people have been flying between stars for thousands of years, and we just figured out how to leave our own planet." But Dr. Murphy was looking at something else on her small computer. She had been reading about all the different alien races and found something interesting. Every smart race in the galaxy had grown up on what they called garden planets. These were worlds with perfect weather, lots of food, and no real dangers. Earth was the only planet with smart life that the aliens thought was too dangerous for normal people to live on. "Maybe being different is exactly what they need right now," she said quietly, so only Jake and Ryan could hear her. Down on the main floor, more aliens were standing up to talk. A tall, thin creature that looked like it was made of living water spoke about how its homeworld had been destroyed. Another alien that looked like a walking tree with golden leaves talked about how many of its people had died. Each story was the same. The Devourers came, ate everything, and left nothing behind. The Devourers were not like any enemy the galaxy had ever faced before. They did not want to rule or steal things or make slaves. They just wanted to eat and grow bigger. When they found a planet with lots of technology and energy, they would surround it with their crystal ships and drain everything until there was nothing left but empty space. What made it worse was that the Devourers seemed to get stronger every time they ate a world. They learned from each attack and got better at fighting the weapons that tried to stop them. The galaxy's best scientists could not figure out how to hurt them or even slow them down. Admiral Jake Harrison listened to all the scared voices and started to think. Earth had something that none of these other worlds had. Humans had learned to fight and survive on a world that was trying to kill them every day. They had predators, diseases, natural disasters, and weather that could freeze or burn them to death. Every human alive was the child of thousands of generations of survivors who had lived through the worst things a planet could throw at them. Dr. Murphy pulled up more information on her computer about how other races fought wars. They used energy, weapons that shot beams of light or plasma. They had shields that could stop almost any attack. Their ships were fast and beautiful and built to fight other ships that used the same kind of technology. But humans had learned to fight differently. They used bullets and explosives and things that hit hard instead of shooting energy. They had learned to be tricky and unpredictable, because that was the only way to survive on Earth. When something bigger and stronger tried to kill them, they did not try to fight it fairly. They did whatever it took to win. "I think I know what we need to do," Dr. Murphy said as she closed her computer. "But the other races are not going to like it because it goes against everything they think is civilized and proper." Jake looked at her with interest. "What do you mean?" "These devourers eat energy and technology. They get stronger when they fight advanced weapons and ships. But humans never learned to be advanced in the same way as these other races. We learned to be tough and mean and to never give up even when everything looks hopeless." Ryan smiled for the first time since they had arrived at the Galactic meeting. "You mean we fight them the human way instead of trying to copy what everyone else is doing?" "Exactly," Dr. Murphy said. "Let's show them what happens when they try to eat something that bites back harder than they do." 3 weeks later, a ship called the ESV Thunder Bay dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Arcturus system. The ship looked nothing like the beautiful alien warships that were already there waiting for battle. It was an old cargo hauler that humans had changed to carry weapons and fighters. Its hull was covered in scratches and burn marks from flying through atmospheres, and its weapons looked like they had been taken from mining equipment and military surplus stores. Captain Steve Johnson stood on the bridge and watched as the alien fleet's leader called them on the radio. Admiral Kethaval was from a race called the Zephyrians, and he looked like a giant lizard covered in blue and silver scales. His image appeared on the Thunder Bay's main screen, and his face showed that he did not think much of the human ship. "Terran vessel, you will stay in the back with the supply ships," the alien admiral commanded in a voice that sounded like he was talking to children. "Your job will be to bring food and ammunition to the real warships when we need it. Do not get in the way of the actual fighting." Behind Captain Johnson, Lieutenant Kate Barnes tried not to smile. Down in the ship's cargo bay, her team had been working day and night to modify their weapons in ways that would have made the alien engineers very worried. Marine Sergeant Tony Martinez had insisted on bringing several boxes of supplies that were not exactly what the military handbook said they should use. "We understand, Admiral," Johnson replied in a polite voice. "We will stay back where we cannot cause any problems for your battle plan." As the alien fleet moved into their fighting formation, Dr. Murphy worked frantically in a laboratory that had been built inside what used to be a storage room. She had been studying how the Devourers attacked and had found something that all the other scientists had missed. The crystal creatures were not just eating matter and energy randomly. They were feeding on specific types of energy waves that most civilized worlds produced in large amounts. "They are drawn to the electromagnetic signatures that come from advanced technology," she explained to Commander Alex Turner, who was Earth's military representative on the ship. "That is why they always attack the most developed worlds first, and leave the primitive ones for later." But humans had something in their arsenal that was unique in the galaxy. They were the only race that had learned to fight and survive without depending completely on advanced technology. Earth's military had been built around the idea of being able to adapt and improvise and use backup systems that other races would think were too primitive to bother with. The Thunder Bay had weapons that shot solid chunks of metal instead of energy beams. It had backup systems that worked without computers. It had crew members who knew how to fix things with hammers and wire instead of fancy repair robots. Everything about it was designed to keep working even when the advanced stuff broke down. When the Devourers finally arrived at Arcturus, they came in a swarm that was so big, it blocked out the light from the stars. The alien fleet's energy weapons lit up space with brilliant colors as they fired everything they had at the crystal creatures. But instead of getting hurt, the Devourers seemed to get stronger and bigger as they absorbed all the energy that was being shot at them. One by one, the beautiful alien warships were surrounded and consumed. Their advanced shields and weapons were useless against an enemy that could eat energy and turn it into more of itself. The aliens had never faced anything like this before, and their tactics were not working at all. Captain Johnson watched the alien ships getting destroyed and knew it was time for humans to show what they could do. "All crew, this is the captain. We are going to break formation and attack the enemy directly. Prepare for combat." The Thunder Bay accelerated past the retreating alien fleet, its modified engines pushing the ship far beyond what the original designers had thought was safe. In the cargo bay, Sergeant Martinez and his Marines prepared their surprise for the Devourers, weapons that did not use energy at all, but instead fired heavy chunks of metal at very high speeds. "Remember what we learned in training," Martinez called to his team over the communication system. "These things eat energy, so we are going to feed them something that will give them a very bad stomachache." The first group of devourers turned toward the Thunder Bay, expecting another easy meal of exotic matter and energy, like they had gotten from the alien ships. Instead, they were hit by a barrage of kinetic rounds, solid metal projectiles that punched through their crystal structures using nothing but pure physical force. The depleted uranium cores created massive cracks inside their bodies, while conventional explosives shattered their forms from the inside out. Dr. Murphy watched from the bridge as 3 devourers simply broke apart and died under the assault. "It is working exactly like we thought it would. They cannot process kinetic energy the same way they absorb directed energy weapons." But the real surprise came when Lieutenant Commander Pat Sullivan activated the ship's secret weapon, a modified electromagnetic pulse system that Dr. Murphy had designed based on her study of Earth's magnetic field. Instead of generating the clean, orderly frequencies that advanced civilizations used in their technology, it broadcast the chaotic, unpredictable patterns that Earth's atmosphere naturally produced during storms and solar flares. The effect on the devourers was immediate and devastating. Their coordinated swarm movements broke down into confused spirals as their hive mind communication network was disrupted by patterns they had never encountered before. They had learned to deal with every type of organized attack, but they had no idea how to handle pure chaos. By the 7 moons of Zephyr, Admiral Kethval's voice crackled over the communication system. "How are you primitive creatures doing what our most advanced weapons could not accomplish?" "It is simple," Captain Johnson replied as he ordered another barrage of solid rounds to be fired at the confused devourers. "We learned to fight in hell itself. These crystal things may be scary to you, but they have never faced anything as mean and stubborn as a human who has been backed into a corner with no way out." The surviving alien ships began to rally behind the Thunder Bay, following its lead as it carved a path through the devourer swarm like a knife cutting through soft metal. As news of the Thunder Bay's success spread through the galaxy's communication networks, something happened that had never occurred before in galactic history. Earth began to mobilize for war, not as a single nation or group, but as an entire planet working together toward one goal. Admiral Katie Walsh received the emergency transmission while she was reviewing defensive plans in the Pentagon. The message was simple but urgent. Humans were needed in space, and they were needed immediately. Within 6 hours, every major power on Earth had agreed to work together in ways they had never managed before, even during their worst crises. The Americans contributed their aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons. The Russians provided their heavy-lift rockets and soldiers who had been trained to survive in the frozen wastelands of Siberia. The Europeans offered their precision engineering and tactical coordination systems. Even smaller nations contributed what they could. Norway sent experts who knew how to work in the deep ocean. Australia provided people who could survive in the desert, and Japan contributed technology that could make big things very small. But it was not just the military that responded to the call. Dr. Ben Parker, a scientist who studied ocean life in California, pointed out that humanity's real advantage was not their weapons or technology. It was their pack-hunting behavior that they had learned from millions of years of evolution on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Every other smart race in the galaxy evolved from animals that ate plants or filtered tiny organisms from water, he explained during an emergency meeting of scientists and military leaders. "We are the only apex predators who made it to space. We are the only ones who know how to hunt things that are bigger and stronger than we are." The first human wolf pack arrived at Arcturus 3 days later. The fleet was called Task Force Alpha, and it consisted of 12 ships that looked like they had been built in someone's garage using spare parts and determination. They were commanded by Captain Nicole Roberts aboard a converted research vessel called the Pioneer. The Devourers had learned from their first encounter with human weapons and had regrouped around the dying star at the center of the Arcturus system. They had formed a defensive sphere and had begun to adapt their tactics to deal with the kinetic threat that the Thunder Bay had introduced. But they had made one critical mistake. They thought they were dealing with a single unusual ship instead of an entire species that specialized in adaptive warfare. All ships, this is Captain Roberts. We are going to show these crystal monsters what a real pack hunt looks like. Scatter formation, approach from all vectors, and remember, we are not trying to be fair or honorable here. The human ships split apart and began moving in patterns that would have horrified any military academy instructor in the galaxy. Unlike the neat battle lines that civilized races used, the humans moved like wolves circling a wounded animal. They had no formal structure and no predictable attack patterns. Each ship captain was free to improvise and adapt based on what they saw happening around them. Commander Gary Lewis led the first penetration of the Devourer defensive formation aboard a converted mining ship called the Frontier. His vessel had been equipped with industrial drilling equipment that had been modified to punch through crystal structures, while his crew used mining charges to create controlled explosions inside the creature's cores. "This is Lewis calling all ships," he announced as his team destroyed their fifth Devourer. "These things are just fancy rocks when you get right down to it. And we have been blasting rocks out of the ground for hundreds of years on Earth." The breakthrough came when Dr. Murphy, who was analyzing battle data from multiple engagements, realized something important about the true nature of the Devourer threat. They were not just consuming matter and energy randomly. They were trying to process and understand the technological signatures of everything they encountered. "They are a form of living computer made from crystal," she announced to the fleet commanders during a brief pause in the fighting. "They have been absorbing and studying every advanced civilization they have destroyed, learning from each victory, and becoming smarter with each world they consume. But they cannot understand chaos. They cannot process something that does not follow logical patterns or predictable rules." This gave her an idea that would have made any reasonable military strategist refuse to work with humans ever again. But Dr. Murphy was beginning to understand that being unreasonable was exactly what made humans effective against an enemy that fed on logic and order. She proposed that the human fleet stop trying to fight the Devourers in any organized way and instead embrace the kind of chaotic, unpredictable combat that had made humans the dominant predators on their death world. No battle plans, no coordinated attacks, no logical tactics, just pure predatory instinct and the kind of improvised violence that had kept the human species alive for millions of years. Captain Roberts listened to the proposal and smiled in a way that would have terrified the alien observers who were watching the battle from a safe distance. "You want us to stop pretending to be civilized and start acting like the monsters we really are?" "Exactly," Dr. Murphy replied. "Let's give them something they have never seen before. A species that fights like it has nothing left to lose because it learned to survive on a world where everything was constantly trying to kill it." The human fleet regrouped and prepared for an attack that violated every principle of military science known to galactic civilization. They were going to hunt the Devourers the way their ancestors had hunted mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, not with superior technology or careful planning, but with teamwork, persistence, and a willingness to take risks that no sane creature would consider. The Devourers had encountered thousands of civilizations and had learned to counter every type of organized military response, but they had never faced anything like a pack of human predators who were willing to improvise, adapt, and do whatever it took to bring down prey that was bigger and stronger than they were. The hunt was about to begin. The attack began at exactly 0300 Galactic Standard Time, but not in any way that military historians would be able to explain later. The human ships did not form battle lines or follow attack patterns. Instead, they moved like wild animals that had caught the scent of wounded prey. Captain Nicole Roberts led the first wave aboard the Pioneer, but she did not lead in the traditional sense of giving orders and expecting them to be followed. Instead, she simply started hunting, and the other human ships followed their instincts to join the pack. Each captain was free to interpret the hunt in their own way, which meant that the Devourers faced not one coordinated attack, but 12 different styles of predatory violence all happening at the same time. The crystalline entities tried to analyze the human attack patterns using the same methods that had allowed them to defeat every other civilization in the galaxy. Their quantum processing cores began calculating probable ship movements, weapon trajectories, and tactical objectives, But every time they thought they had figured out what the humans were trying to do, the attack changed into something completely different. Commander Gary Lewis took his mining ship Frontier on a course that appeared to be a direct frontal assault on the largest Devourer cluster. The crystal creatures moved to intercept what they calculated was a suicide run. But at the last second, Lewis used his ship's industrial thrusters to execute a maneuver that was only possible because his vessel had been designed to operate in asteroid fields. He spun his ship around the Devourer formation and attacked from behind while they were still turning to face where he had been. "Target practice," Lewis called out, as his drilling equipment punched through the crystalline structure of 3 Devourers that had been grouped too close together. Just like blasting through a cave-in back home, except these rocks fight back. Meanwhile, Captain Diana Price was leading a group of 5 ships in what the alien observers could only describe as organized chaos. Her destroyer Wolverine and its escorts were using gravitational slingshots around asteroid debris to achieve impossible acceleration curves, while firing kinetic rounds that had been loaded with everything from depleted uranium to compressed coal to chunks of iron that had been salvaged from Earth's old battleships. "We are not trying to be smart about this," she explained to the confused Zephyrian tactical observers who were monitoring the battle. "We are trying to be so crazy and unpredictable that these things cannot figure out what we are going to do next because we do not know what we are going to do next either." Dr. Murphy watched the battle unfold from the command center aboard the Pioneer and realized that she was witnessing something that had never happened before in the history of galactic warfare. The humans were not fighting like a civilized military force. They were hunting like a pack of apex predators that had evolved on a world where hesitation meant death, and predictability meant becoming something else's dinner. Each human ship, captain was making decisions based on instinct, experience, and what Sergeant Martinez called the ancient human art of making stuff up as you go along and hoping it works out. They were using tactics that had no names because they were being invented in real time by people who had learned to survive by being more stubborn and adaptable than anything else on their planet. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, found themselves facing an enemy that they could not understand or predict. Their advanced processing systems were designed to analyze sophisticated military strategies and counter them with precise tactical responses. But human tactics were not sophisticated. They were instinctive, chaotic, and based on millions of years of evolutionary programming that said the only rule in a fight was to win by whatever means necessary. Commander Pete Morrison led his converted cargo hauler, Dakota, through the Devourer formation, in a pattern that looked completely random, but was actually based on techniques his grandfather had used while hunting wolves in Alaska. He was not trying to destroy the crystal creatures directly. He was trying to separate them from their pack and make them vulnerable to attacks from other human ships. "This is Morrison to all units," he called out as he successfully isolated a group of smaller Devourers from the main formation. "I've got some strays cut off from the herd. Who wants to help me take them down?" 3 human ships immediately converged on the isolated Devourers and destroyed them using a combination of kinetic rounds, mining charges, and electromagnetic pulse weapons that created patterns of chaos the crystalline entities could not process. The attack was over in less than 30 seconds, but it demonstrated something that would change the course of the war. The Devourers were not just being defeated, they were being hunted by a species that was better at hunting than they were at being hunted. Every tactic they tried to use was countered not by superior technology or careful planning, but by human adaptability and the kind of predatory persistence that had made humanity the dominant species on a death world. Dr. Murphy made a discovery that would prove to be the key to understanding why humans were so effective against the Devourers. The crystalline entities were essentially living computers that had been designed to process and respond to logical, predictable inputs. They had learned to counter every type of organized military response by analyzing patterns and developing appropriate countermeasures. But human combat behavior was not logical or predictable because it was based on evolutionary programming that was millions of years older than civilization itself. When humans fought, they were not following military doctrine or tactical manuals. They were following instincts that had been shaped by countless generations of ancestors who had survived by being more dangerous than the things that were trying to kill them. The Devourers cannot process chaos because they have never encountered a species that uses chaos as a deliberate tactical choice, Dr. Murphy explained to the fleet commanders. Every other civilization they have fought tried to be more organized and logical than they were. We are the first species they have met that fights by being less organized and more unpredictable. Captain Roberts smiled as she listened to the explanation. So you are saying that our greatest strength against these things is that we learned to fight dirty and never grew out of it? Exactly, Dr. Murphy replied. We are about to teach the galaxy that sometimes the best way to fight monsters is to be bigger monsters ourselves. The final battle took place in the ruins of the Kepler 442 system, where the Devourers had built what appeared to be their main hive complex. The crystalline entities had grown to enormous sizes, some reaching the size of small moons, and their combined processing power was attempting to decode and understand the technological signatures of every civilization they had consumed over the centuries. The human fleet that arrived to face them was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen in its long history of warfare. Led by Admiral Sam Carter aboard the flagship Enterprise, it consisted of nearly 50 vessels that looked like they had been built from scrap metal and held together with determination and welding wire. Each ship bore the names of Earth cities, regions, and historical figures that meant nothing to the alien observers but everything to the humans who served aboard them. All units, this is Admiral Carter, the veteran commander announced to both human and alien forces that had gathered to witness what many believed would be humanity's final stand. Today we are going to teach these crystal nightmares why Earth is classified as a death world and why humans are the only species crazy enough to call such a place home. The human strategy defied every principle of military science that had been developed by galactic civilization over thousands of years. Instead of coordinated formations and carefully planned attacks, they moved in waves that seemed to follow no pattern at all. Ships peeled off at random intervals, regrouped in unexpected configurations, and used weapon systems that violated several laws of physics by virtue of being too primitive to know they should not work. Captain Diana Price commanded a squadron of destroyers that she had named after predatory animals from Earth. The wolverine, the tiger, the shark, and the eagle moved through space like their namesakes moved through their natural environments, with lethal grace and an understanding of violence that came from millions of years of evolutionary refinement. We are not trying to outthink them, she explained to the alien tactical observers who were monitoring the battle from what they hoped was a safe distance. We are trying to be too wild and unpredictable for their computer brains to understand, because computers cannot process something that does not follow rules. The Devourers had never faced anything like the assault that was unleashed upon them. Human tactics were based on improvisation, desperation, and what military historians would later call creative violence. The crystalline entity's quantum processing cores, which had been designed to analyze and counter sophisticated military strategies, simply could not comprehend an enemy that made tactical decisions based on intuition, stubbornness, and what Sergeant Martinez had once called the ancient human art of being too mean to die. Commander Pete Morrison took his cargo hauler Dakota on a course that appeared to be completely suicidal until the last possible moment when he used a technique that his grandmother had taught him for herding cattle on the family ranch. He drove a group of smaller Devourers into the path of a larger one, causing them to collide and damage each other while he escaped unharmed. Cattle, crystal monsters, same basic principle, he called out over the communication system. You just have to understand herd behavior and know how to make them go where you want them to go, instead of where they want to go. Working with Dr. Murphy's chaos theory calculations, Morrison coordinated a simultaneous attack by 17 ships, each broadcasting completely random electromagnetic patterns, while firing kinetic rounds that had been loaded with materials designed to create unpredictable chemical reactions when they hit their targets. The combination of kinetic damage and electromagnetic chaos was more than the Devourers' processing systems could handle. The result was catastrophic for the crystalline entities. Their hive mind, which had successfully coordinated the destruction of thousands of civilizations, began to fragment under the assault of patterns it could not process or understand. The massive structures that had seemed invincible just hours before started consuming each other in a desperate attempt to restore order to their collective consciousness. "This is Morrison calling all ships," the commander announced as the central hive began to collapse in on itself. "I think we just gave these things the worst headache in galactic history." But the real breakthrough came when the humans realized that they were not just fighting the devourers, they were teaching them. Every chaotic attack, every unpredictable maneuver, every violation of logical tactical doctrine was being absorbed and processed by the crystalline entities. But instead of making them stronger, the exposure to human chaos was breaking down their ability to function as a collective intelligence. Dr. Murphy watched as individual devourers began to separate from the main hive and start moving in patterns that looked almost random. "They are not dying," she announced to the fleet commanders. "They are becoming individuals instead of parts of a collective mind. The chaos we have been feeding them is teaching them to think for themselves instead of as a group." Admiral Carter understood the implications immediately. "You mean we are not destroying them? We are setting them free from whatever was controlling them." "Exactly," Dr. Murphy replied. "They were never really evil. They were just following their programming to consume and process information. But human chaos has broken that programming, and now they have to learn how to exist as separate beings instead of parts of a hive mind." The battle ended not with a massive explosion or a final desperate assault, but with something that no one had expected: communication. Individual devourers began broadcasting signals that the human translation systems could barely interpret, but the message was clear enough. They were trying to say thank you in ways that their newly individual minds could manage. Captain Roberts stood on the bridge of the Pioneer and watched as former devourers began to disperse throughout the galaxy, no longer driven by an irresistible urge to consume everything they encountered. Some of them approached human ships with what appeared to be curiosity rather than hunger. Others simply drifted away into deep space, apparently content to explore the universe as independent beings for the first time in their existence. "Mission accomplished," Admiral Carter announced to the combined human and alien fleets. "The galaxy is safe, and we did not even have to destroy our enemy to do it. We just had to teach them how to be free." In the months that followed, the galaxy discovered that humanity had not just saved them from the devourer threat, they had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization itself. The other races began to realize that their perfect, orderly societies had made them vulnerable to threats they could not understand or adapt to quickly enough. Human advisors were requested throughout the galaxy to help establish colonies on deathworlds that had been considered uninhabitable. Human tactical training became the most sought-after military education in known space, and human-designed backup systems became standard equipment on ships throughout civilized space because everyone had learned that sometimes the most advanced solution was not the best solution. The galaxy had begged for salvation, and Earth's beasts had delivered it in the most human way possible, by refusing to give up, adapting to impossible circumstances, and turning their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. In saving the galaxy, humanity had also preserved something even more important: the beautiful chaotic diversity that made life worth protecting in the first place.